Hi, everyone. Happy New Year and welcome back to the Forum webinar series. This is our first one of 2026, and I'm really excited about what you're going to hear today. My name is Priya Chaya, and I am the Associate Director of Content here at the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And I'm just so glad to see everyone here today. In case you don't know, Preservation Leadership Forum is the professional membership program of the National Trust. This webinar series is made possible by members of Preservation Leadership Forum, and we sincerely thank those of you that are here with us today. Today's webinar is called Mapping Stories, Managing Places, Connecting Communities, GIS for Historic Preservation. And it's going to be a panel discussion on how organizations can leverage GIS in historic preservation. You all will hear several case studies from very exciting speakers highlighting how GIS platforms can empower communities and preservation professionals can manage and visualize their unique histories. I know many of you are answering this in the chat, but if you haven't yet, let us know where you're from. And to better help our speakers understand who is in the audience, share why you're attending today and how often you use GIS. Before we get started, a few logistics. We will take questions from the audience during the webinar. Please send questions via the Q&A function directly to the panelists. You're welcome to submit at any point during the webinar, but we will be waiting until the Q&A section at the end of the session to answer questions. You are also encouraged to communicate with each other using the chat function. If you submit a question in the chat, you will get a message from my colleague Colleen to actually send those into the Q&A function. That helps us keep track of what questions come in. So if we don't answer it during the session, we are able to collect that information to answer afterwards. The closed captioning function is enabled for this webinar. You can enable it and disable it through the controls at the bottom of your screen or through your own personal audio sessions. It sort of depends on what version of Zoom you're using. The presentations have a few videos and animations, so please be patient with us because sometimes what works when we're not online needs an extra moment during the actual event. We'll be sharing links so you can explore the projects on your own if there is an issue with the tech. Following the program, we will send out a recording of today's webinar directly to the email you used to register. And finally, all forum webinars are archived on our YouTube channel. As a reminder, we ask everyone to be respectful to each other in the chat and follow our code of conduct. Colleen's going to share that link with you in a moment. And now I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Kate Lenzer, who is the National Trust's GIS, Senior GIS Manager. Sorry, Kate.
All good. Thank you so much, Priya, for that introduction. And welcome, everybody. I love seeing all of these different locations coming in. I feel like this is even a story map waiting to happen, seeing where all of you are from. And also, thanks for giving us a little bit of context about how you're using GIS. It helps us understand, not only for this webinar, but in the future, thinking about additional webinar and resources we can provide. So as Priya mentioned, my name is Kate Lenzer, and I'm the Senior GIS Manager at the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And broadly, I work with a small team within the National Trust Research and Impact Division to support geospatial projects across our organization. And I thought I'd just share a little bit about myself. I've worked in the GIS field for about 15 years, but a lot of that time was in land and water conservation. And so when I first started working in preservation, this is now about 6 years ago, I knew I had a lot to learn. And so naturally, I started looking for examples of how geospatial technology, GIS mapping, was being used across the preservation field. And of course, I came across a few examples, including projects that the National Trust and others have done. But I was always curious to know more, always hungry to learn more and learn from the people who were actually doing the work. So next slide. So as we know, GIS is it's an important tool that's being used in preservation, but preservation itself is such a broad field. It was one of the things I was just amazed at when I came over into preservation. And so even you all, some of you work on policy, some of you work on resource inventory and designation, others on curation and education, site management, culture, storytelling. And honestly, I know that there's some of you out there who probably do it all, and you all work at different scales. Sometimes at a site, locally, for a state, for a region, across the country, maybe even internationally. And so this, I guess this diversity of the work was one of the things that I've always appreciated about preservation. And I also appreciate that GIS has been a tool that's been able to be applied across those broad areas in preservation. And so I hope as we go through this webinar today, that's one of the things that you can take away, regardless of the scale at which you work, regardless of which area of preservation in which you work, you're able to pull some inspiration from these presenters today. Next slide. We also realize you're coming from different levels of experience. And so we've designed this webinar to be accessible to everyone, regardless of your experience in GIS. We hope that if you're new to GIS, you can be inspired by the projects and the people here today and start to think about ways these tools may be useful to your organization. My advice to you is to not get bogged down in the technical details and focus instead about the possibilities, the big picture, the resources that you'll hear about that are available to you. If you're a seasoned GIS professional, or at least have some experience, you know that this work can be difficult. There's always a problem to solve along the way. And so today we hope that you're able to take away more specific technical details about how these projects were carried out, what specific software products were used, and the lessons learned across data management, community engagement, and approaches for data curation and creation. Next slide. And so over the next hour, you're going to hear from 5 speakers who are each sharing examples of how GIS is used as a powerful tool across different facets of preservation. First, Hannah will share a little bit about the City of Little Rock's Historic District Map Viewer. Second, Karina from Latinos and Heritage Conservation will talk about mapping memory and stories through the Abuelas Project. Third, Allison will share about the National Trust mapping work on Route 66. And then last, but certainly not least, Andres and Lydia from Esri will share additional examples of GIS and preservation of people who they work with and other resources that are available to you all. So without further delay, I'm going to go ahead and pass over to Hannah.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm very excited to share with you what the City of Little Rock is doing, integrating GIS and historic preservation. So my talk is going to be focused on GIS for municipal preservation programs. So that's your CLG programs. And I'm going to talk about a couple things that we've done over the years, but I'm going to focus in on one specific application or viewer. So next slide. Okay, so I just want to kind of set the scene with what context we're dealing with, which is kind of the full integration between GIS and preservation. It's all about place. So we're going to talk a little bit about the MacArthur Park Historic District in Little Rock. It is the sole regulated historic district in Arkansas. You can't landmark individual properties per state law. You can only landmark districts. Otherwise, I think we'd have a lot more. So we've been able to focus in on this one for the past 40 years of regulation. What you see on the left is just a 2025 aerial of the boundary of the district, and then our interactive map kind of showing how that gets kind of integrated into GIS, or how we're displaying those graphics. Next slide. Okay, so where's MacArthur Park? It is directly abutting the main downtown portion of the city. You can see that 2 interstates, well, one interstate runs directly east of it. The other interstate runs directly through it on the southern boundary. But folks in MacArthur Park, typically from their views, have good views of the taller buildings downtown. So that's where we're at, more on the ground. Next slide. So additional information, we love to talk about this. Period of significance is 1842 to 1960. So we have a wide breadth of interesting artifacts, about 282 structures, including accessory structures, 1 National Historic Landmark, 20 National Register sites that are listed, a number of historic architectural styles, a variety of traditional building materials, and it is in the traditional grid system with lots of alleyways. And at the center of that is MacArthur Park itself. I think it's about 30 acres. It has a pretty fun history. And then it also houses our American Museum of Fine Arts, or Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts. Interestingly enough, we do have a lot of new development in the district for a number of reasons. And we also have 20 plus vacant lots. So a lot is going on here. Next slide. So this is just a view of how the district has changed over the years. 1940 aerial, 1960, and 1998. Primarily that change is the removal of buildings for the interstate I-630, which has a huge history in Little Rock with urban renewal and just a whole change in the cultural landscape. So MacArthur Park is a kind of a microcosm of that interaction. Next slide. And then this is just pictures of the historic sites that we have. So lots of varieties. Next slide. And our new construction. So go ahead, next slide. And then some of our historic streetscapes that have accidentally been removed per certain projects, and sometimes even through the history of our city planning projects. So I'll talk a little bit about how we have used GIS to identify those for property owners and our public works team. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to dive into it. One of the first things in this kind of generation of using GIS at the city that we've done is we've made a local historic district viewer. The point of this viewer is that it's primarily to help property owners manage their properties, have access to information that the city has on their property, help them go through the certificate of appropriateness process, as well as other users. And because we built it at staff level, we use it daily as staff. And you could typically go to littlerock.gov/preservation, but right before this presentation, our IT kind of updated our website. So I think the main link to this map can be provided in the chat here in a moment, if y'all want to kind of open that up and follow along. Next slide. So in creating this data set as a historic preservation program in the city that does do regulation, what you'll find in this viewer is 378 sites. That is 278 existing sites, 47 lots, and 28 vacant lots. 20 to 28 vacant lots. We've had some filled recently. This viewer is composed of 15 plus data sets and collections that are digital and non-digital resources when we started out. So a lot of them are historic photos and map scans and things like that we've then digitized. The 5 priority audiences are city staff and commissioners, property owners, developers and contractors, researchers, and realtors. And it gets about 7.2 views a day, probably primarily because we use it every day. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to go across some of the data layers that we have, historic sites and buildings. So when you click on a site, that pops up information about it that is put together through what we call an attribute table. And this is all using Esri's instant app. So it's actually a very simple application. The background data structure is a bit complicated, but putting it together is quite simple. We also took this opportunity to add a layer of lost historic sites. So all of those hatched red building outlines, primarily we lost those not for lack of controlling demolition, but because a tornado went through in the 1990s. And because of that, we have a lot of infill opportunities. And we talk a lot about infill here in Arkansas. And then in addition to that, we have an additional complication of having a very unique situation with having state zoning boundaries, which I won't go too much into, but this is just to help out property owners who have kind of overlaid regulation. And then as kind of an added benefit to us, we have put together a buildings by decade kind of layer that you can click on and see how historic sites by decade are distributed throughout the district. Next slide. Okay, so this is kind of the fun and maybe the scary thing for a lot of folks, but this is how our data integration works. I presented this at a kind of local GIS conference, so it's definitely built for people who work with GIS, but I think it gives folks here a good understanding of kind of how we've put things together. In general, we have county data for building outlines basics, our Arkansas Historic Preservation Program, SHPO data, National Park Service, not directly ingested, but referenced for accuracy, archives, field photography, and things submitted by our community. Next slide. Okay, so initially we had the sources of data that are on the left, and we actually expanded that full data set from what we got as the base from our SHPO office into adding all of these different data points so that we could do more actual analysis on our end, which this took a large amount of time, days and days and days, but it has all been very beneficial to us as we just look at the historic materials that we have. Next slide. And then we also automated this data to manage the workflow of it, which I highly recommend working closely with your GIS professionals if you are at a city to do this well. Otherwise, this is not going to be a resource. You're going to get bogged down in making sure it gets kept up well. In this, I do want to point out that we have a complication with getting data from our SHPO office, and that's mostly because they don't have, in my opinion, a very strong GIS support. If they did, they would be way better equipped to help probably every CLG program build something like this for their city. So that's my plug. Next slide, please. And this is just a picture of the actual materials that people have access to when they click on those building outlines, and just how helpful it is as a resource, even in building staff reports for it. And I'm going to quickly go through the other slides so we kind of stay on time. Next one. Another audience is the property owner. This property owner helped used the resources here to take this building from unsafe vacant back into occupancy. It's now a rentable unit and looks quite lovely. Next one. We also use this to provide community engagement or awareness of what COA applications have been applied for. And they can see application submittals through this viewer. Next slide. Developers can see potential infill lots and get just basic information from the assessor's office, and also look at other projects that have been approved and constructed in the district to get an idea of what we're looking for. Next slide. And then researchers. This is a wonderful resource for researchers here and people helping with tax credit projects. Next slide. And then our realtors. I love our realtors. Sometimes they don't put the right year on when a house was built, so they can use this anytime they wish to provide more information about the wonderful resource that they have kind of in their care at this point. Next slide. And then just a couple things, future modifications and potential for something like this. We'll kind of integrate more aerial-based maps, the Sanborn maps. That's a big project, integrating more current photos, and then just we're able to adapt this for a lot of unanticipated users. Next slide. And then advice that I would give is be best friends with your city's GIS professionals. Do learn GIS, don't be scared. It's very fun. If you are a placemaker and place thinker, this will make a lot of sense to you. And then have open conversations with your SHPO office about kind of data structure, what you're looking at doing, and how can you help them, they can help you. And then lastly, automate as much as you can to create a workflow. Nothing is worse than spending time on a project that you end up abandoning data management over. And then I think just for time, we'll probably skip through a couple of these, but we did win some awards on this, and it helped to launch a couple more community engagement agendas or projects initiatives. Next one. And then we have a couple more viewers here, which you can kind of find on our website. But just for time's sake, I'm going to, I can talk about those a little bit in the chat maybe, but I think we can kind of run through. So. Active projects for grants, and then next slide. Okay, well, I'm going to hand things off to Karina.
Thank you, Hannah. Hi, everyone. My name is Karina Malber, and I am the geospatial project manager at Latinos and Heritage Conservation. I am based out of La Isla del Encanto. I live in Puerto Rico, so I see a few people in the chat from La Isla. So if you want to connect, please reach out to us. But Latinos and Heritage Conservation, we are a nationwide nonprofit. So if you are based out of any other region of the United States, please check us out so that you can connect with your closest staff member. But I'm here because I'm going to talk to you about the Abuelas Project, and I'm going to set a timer because I'm a yapper and I can go over my time. But today I'm going to talk about GIS and historic preservation, but more importantly, I want to talk to you about people, memory, and story. Because for us, GIS is a medium that we use. It's not the point of the Abuelas Project. So our work here lives at the intersection of community memory, historic preservation, and digital tools. And everything that we do here at LHC, especially with the Abuelas Project, is grounded on one core question of how do we honor people's stories while using technology responsively and creatively. So next slide, please. So the Abuelas Project is a community-centered digital humanities initiative that was launched a few years ago. It documents Latinx places, histories, and memories that are often left out of official preservation narratives. So we figured if we're being let out, then we'll just make our own. So one thing, again, I want to harp on is that, yeah, GIS is really cool. It's super awesome when you're scrolling through, you get all these interactive features. But truly, the hero of Abuelas is the people. The people is what makes GIS the cool part. And because of that, one thing I want to share is that in 2024, we actually were the Digital Humanities and Popular Culture ArcGIS Story Map winners, which was a major privilege for us and something that really launched us. So I will be sharing that story map a little bit later in this presentation. But I want to kind of talk a little bit more about the Abuelas Project because it's really important for us to understand who exactly this project is serving. So we work particularly with elders, community members, organizers, families, anyone of the Latinx community or anyone working with Latinx communities to document places that matter to them. This can be homes, businesses, churches, labor sites, gathering spaces, places that might not look historic on paper or physically, but are deeply historic in the lived experiences of the community there. Our role is not to extract stories, rather we sit with people, we listen, and we co-create. So the maps are just one way to hold and share the memory, especially within historic preservation, considering we are place-based, but it's not to flatten it. And I'll talk a little bit more in this presentation about the techniques that we use. So next slide, Rhonda. So our GIS structure, we have three main components that we use. Everything exists off of an experience builder. So this is our central website that's accessible to the public where we host most of our material. From there, our main tool that we use are story maps. But before we talk about story maps, I'm actually going to talk to you about our Survey 123 first. So our Survey 123 is our entry port. The Abuelas Project is a community submission portal where we invite community to submit their stories, their memories, their recipes, their photographs, their oral histories, their recordings, their everything. From there, we, in their own words and in their own language, from there, we take the submissions that we gathered through our Survey 123, and we go out into the community and we also create story maps. These are thematic story maps. So where in our story maps, where it comes together is that spatial data meets narrative, images, and historical context. So something that is important for us in the Abuelas Project is that story maps allows us to create something that feels a lot less like a database and much more like a guided story. So instead of me showing an elder a 20-page report that's black and white that might be in an inaccessible language, I'm instead creating a story map alongside them. And this is incredibly important as we're talking about advice, is that we as GIS professionals might see a boundary in a very particular black and white way. To community, boundaries might be a place of harm, might be a line that they might not have historically been allowed to cross. So as we're creating GIS features and data maps and layers and stuff like that, we want to make sure that we're co-creating it and that we're using Esri tools and GIS tools that make sense for them. So next slide. I'm going to talk to you about one of our particular tools, our favorite one, my favorite one. I'm going to speak for the rest of staff, memory maps. So one of the most important processes of creating a GIS digital tool is the before you actually sit at your computer to make this tool. One of the things that was important for us was that we realized a lot of our participants were kind of struggling with seeing a map and seeing themselves spatially and seeing the relevance of their story spatially. So we figured, why don't we sit with them and why don't we map these memories? So this often occurs in community workshops or one-on-one conversations where we physically sit with them either at a restaurant, their home, their farm, and we ask them questions of where have you gathered? Where have been sites of joy? Where have been sites not of joy? Whatever that means for you. Where did you feel safe? Where have you experienced specific memories? From there, our public historian is able to engage them into an oral history activity where now the participant is able to connect their memory to a place base. And that enables us to be able to create more of a dynamic product also and invites them into the process of creating their ultimate story map. So these moments are slow, they're relational, and most importantly, they are often emotional, and they're supposed to be. Only after these conversations do we translate memory into a digital form. GIS becomes a way for us to extend the lives of these memories, not to replace the original interaction. So this step is really about care, about making sure that what goes online still reflects the spirit, complexity, and consent of the people who are sharing their memories with us. Next slide. So as promised, I'm going to show you our award-winning Bracero story map. But really what you're seeing right now is our experience builder, where all of our story maps are based off of collections. Within that collection, you're going to find a lot of information, but I wanted to show you our award-winning story map. So what is important about this particular story map that was important for us is that it centers labor migration and transnational history. Stories are often told through numbers and not through necessarily place-based memories, especially from the individuals who lived them themselves. So I want to, in this slide, as I'm coming up on my time, is to give you some advice about how we proceed with GIS here at LHC and something to incorporate within your own organizations, projects, all of that. So the first advice that I want to take you with is to think about your story before you think about your technology. Often, if you are new to GIS, it is overwhelming. Creating an account, getting nervous about it, and being like, oh my gosh, I'm going to make this really cool thing. And you have all these big ideas, which is awesome. But at the same time, you can get very stressed out very easily. Don't forget your story in that process. Think about your narrative arc. Think about your emotional parts. Think about your audience. Who will be the ones who will be reading these stories? The text should support the story. The text should not be leading your story. The second thing is to keep it simple and accessible. Avoid clutter, use constant fonts, colors, and formatting. Add alternative text and think about mobile users. So Esri is now adding on a lot more features to their story maps to make it user-friendly for mobiles. Think about it, play time with it. Think about your work plan and schedule time to work around those features. This might seem contradictive, but my next advice is to use maps sparingly, but intentional. So not every single piece of data needs to be mapped. Choose what actually needs to be mapped to deepen the understanding of the story that you are telling. Don't go out of your way to create a map because you feel as though you're supposed to have 20 million maps. You're going to easily run into a storage problem and easily run into a lot of headaches. Next advice is to center community voices. If you're using oral histories or sensitive material, always prioritize consent and transparency. Right now, we are getting ready to release our new Borderlands story map collection, and we are in that process where we are going back and forth with our community members to chat with them of, is this the quote that you would like for us to use? Is this the image you would like for us to use? Did we synthesize what you told us in the correct fashion? And lastly, and most importantly, test your story maps, test your GIS features. Make sure you're sending it to people who are not experts on GIS, who may not be experts on the material that you're portraying, and see what their experience is. You might be surprised that a map to you that seems easy to interact with, they didn't know it was an interactive map, and you have to share it with them. So I'm gonna give, that's my advice. We're gonna go to the last slide because I have some fun things I want to say. So to wrap up, I just want to say that historic preservation doesn't only live in registers or archives. Historic preservation lives in people, especially the people who are keeping those memories alive. GIS gives us a way to visualize that, but the responsibility is always on us to ensure the community is first in that process. So one of the things I really want to share out is that if you're interested in the Abuelas Project and you're interested in GIS and Latinx historic preservation and Latinos and heritage conservation, is that we actually are hosting our biannual Congreso in Chicago this August. So if you are looking for a space for practitioners, scholars, community members, organizers, anyone to come together on topics of heritage, memory, and justice around Latinx populations, I highly, highly encourage you to check out Congreso. One, meet me in person, ask me questions about GIS in person, but two, to connect with other individuals who are in similar positions as you and to create community together. You can scan the QR code here on the slide to link us directly to our latinoheritage.us website. Our email is there. And I just want to thank you all so much for your time, for being here, and for caring for the stories that are behind these maps. So now I have the privilege and the honor of announcing that Allison will be talking about one of my personal favorite story maps that I get to interact with often.
Thank you so much, Karina. I love looking at the work that LHC does, so it's always a pleasure to get to see that presentation. We've done it in many forms since we've done it. But hi, I'm Allison. I'm a GIS analyst at the National Trust, and I'm based in Boston. I work with Kate, who you've already met, on implementing a bunch of different GIS and data initiatives at the National Trust. But a lot of the work I've done since I've been here has been in service of our broader Preserve Route 66 initiative, the goals of which are mainly to support trying to get the route designated as a National Historic Trail in this year of its centennial. But also like directing attention to legacy businesses and new opportunities for people along the routes. And as the GIS team, some of our sub goals of that have been to try to create the most comprehensive database of places on Route 66 and kind of try pioneering some new technologies to support preservation on Route 66. And one of the main things we've done with that is the Route 66 Remaps Story Map collection series. I know a lot of story map talk here, but they're really important, cool tools. So we're going to talk about that. So next slide, please. So Route 66 Remap is a story map series that explores the evolution of Route 66 through a lens of maps and place-based data. So the point of this is that we wanted to tell a fuller, more dynamic story of Route 66. It's not just 1950s Americana and hamburgers. Like we really wanted to explore, there's a lot more things to say about it. So in part of that, what we wanted to do was to recontextualize the past, to show what Route 66 has been, and emphasize how change has been really central to its identity, but also stay in the present, document the current state of Route 66, and show ways to get involved in its continued preservation. So these different story maps that we have here highlight some of those different goals and data points. So target those narratives. So we did this collection so that we can hit all these different points and different things. So we're going to kind of go through all of them individually, but next slide. I want to talk about kind of some advice when you're approaching making a bunch of story maps or making even just one story map to tell a story. So in doing these, I kind of realized a lot of this was either a data first kind of story or a story first story. So with data first stories, you have a data set maybe, or you have access to a data set from a partner of yours, and you'd like to kind of show that to the people, make the data accessible to people. You want to tell the story within that. Or you're creating a data set, which is a big task. And in the process of doing that, you often come across some interesting stories you want to tell. So that's one way of going about it. But then sometimes you want to go story first. Like you have a narrative that you want to tell, you have a question you want to answer, and so then you go seeking the data to back that up so that you're not just frivolously using data. And sometimes the story map tool, if you're familiar with it, it has a lot of really interesting dynamic things that you could do. And sometimes you're like, oh, I know that if I could do this kind of dynamic thing, it would really have an impact to tell this certain story. And so you look for the right data and the right stories to fuse those two things together. So next slide. The first story map we did as part of this was kind of a data first story. We found this data set from the Newberry Library. It was the James R. Powell Route 66 postcard collection. It's a collection of about 3,500 postcards of vintage motels, restaurants, places, curio shops along Route 66. And they were just cool. Like I was looking through them. I'm like, this is awesome. And I realized that a lot of people doing preservation work on Route 66 were using these postcards kind of to show a snapshot of the past. A lot of these places don't exist anymore. So this is kind of a really useful tool that people are already using. And we thought, wouldn't it be great if we mapped them all, if we put them on a map so that people could actually interact with the places spatially. So it was a massive data creation effort that we did to map this all. And evaluate a lot of the businesses that are pictured. Are they still operating? Is the building still standing? Did it have a neon sign? Was it affiliated with anything? What's the category it falls in? And you can view all these postcards through this postcard map, which is embedded in our story map. But next slide, we did want to make a story map to show off these postcards as we were going through them. I think as I was spending a lot of time transcribing and mapping, I was coming across some really interesting and nuanced stories that kind of rounded out a lot of my perceptions about Route 66. So we made this postcard road trip to let people explore some different postcards in different states, zooming in, zooming out, adding all this extra functionality to get people excited and trying to look at these places, embedding Google Street Views to see where these places are in the present. And we were able to tell some different stories of Route 66 with it. There's some stories of historic racism that are a part of it. A road trip is like a pretty lighthearted thing, but we can also kind of draw people in to tell a little bit more of the nuance there. All right, so next slide. And so another data set that we created as a part of our data creation efforts was a legacy business database. And this is something that we knew that we wanted. We wanted to be able to assess where are these legacy businesses along Route 66. So we had a team of 3 research associates kind of drive on Google Street View and identify businesses on Route 66 that have been running for a long time, passed through family generations, have some special connection to Route 66. And we identified 492 legacy businesses and also parsed out a bunch of attributes that would be good for telling stories with. So knowing that we wanted to tell stories with this informed how we were creating the data. We knew okay, let's point out if these places had neon signs. So next slide. And when we put this into the story map, we had all these attributes that we were able to kind of highlight with these map actions and pull out ooh, this is where businesses that are motel type places or have been around since 1926. We had all these categories and made it nice to engage with, but these legacy business scholars looked at these places so close and were able to kind of highlight certain case studies. So you can kind of do this macro data scale, but also within the story map, you could zoom in on individual stories of individual places as well. Next slide. So here's a story of where a data first approach didn't really work out. I thought it would be an interesting idea to do kind of a census demographic analysis of Route 66 as a whole. So I pulled out census tracts from everything that intersected Route 66 and tried to analyze demographics and use some interesting statistics tools and see if we could discover something new about Route 66 that we weren't really able to do before without big data like this. And it didn't really work. I couldn't come up with anything interesting because I didn't really go into it with intention in mind. I was like, I'm going to let the data tell me what it wants to tell me. And instead you get a bunch of maps like this where you're like, okay, here's the median age of the total population along Route 66 in these big chunks. What does this actually mean to me? I couldn't come up with anything really statistically significant or even just visually compelling. and realized it's good if you're going to be doing big data like that, especially like working at this scale is difficult because like zip code census tracts are like the only scale that you can consistently do for this large of a space, and you can't tell a lot from that scale when you're trying to answer questions about like who are the people on Route 66. So I would say this is where a story first approach might work better. So next slide. When like reassessing this story, I was like, what we really wanted to tell was that we wanted to contextualize Route 66 in its past. We wanted to look back at its 100 years of being Route 66, but maybe even before that. And we wanted to show that it's kind of fundamentally changing and adapting long before the interstate bypassed it, which is the main story that everyone knows about it. The interstate bypassed it and it quote unquote died, but it didn't. It's continued and lived on. So we wanted to keep it in the present, grounding it into the past. So we sought out these historic maps that are publicly accessible. If you've been watching this go through, it's been going through some of them. So from the Library of Congress, the David Rumsey map collection from Stanford. And so I geo-referenced these maps, which if you don't know what that is, you take this paper map that's been digitized and you say, okay, this point is where Los Angeles is here. And then this point is where Los Angeles is on the digital map. And so you're kind of point by point mapping, stretching these maps to fit, to become digitized so you can interact with them and add these other more dynamic data layers on top of them. So you can see here, we've added the present Route 66 boundary on top of this historic map. So it's kind of a way of merging the past and the present, which is what we're trying to do with Route 66. And we go way further back with its history. We talk about before colonization even happened in the United States. So I think this was a big effort. It's a pretty big story, but we also bring it all into the present and end with that advocacy for the National Historic Trails. And it just utilizes a lot of cool story map features. So I definitely recommend checking it out. I'm very passionate about making it. All right, so next slide. And I'll move quickly here. So another story, this is where we knew we wanted to tell a story about how historic tax credits can be utilized on Route 66. We had data about historic tax credit maps, and we knew that we could really tell a simple map story using Story Map's dynamic map tools and map choreography, if you've ever heard that term. So we, as you just saw here, we just wanted to be able to say, here's all these historic tax credit sites. Here's where they've been on Route 66. Here's these places that could be used there. Look at this opportunity. So just kind of merging, like we know what we want to advocate for. We know what tools we have. Let's bring them together. Let's make this story map simple, straightforward. Historic tax credits. Next slide. And so these story maps are a great way to share data that you have, but we also wanted to kind of make the data sets that we were spending a lot of time creating publicly available. So we added, all these are available in our Preservation Geospatial Resource Hub, which is something that we've been building to try to make geospatial resources more accessible to the preservation community at large. We want to be featuring geospatial projects on here and geospatial data sets that are free to use for everyone. So it's in early stages, but stay tuned and check it out if it's something that's interesting to you, and let us know how you might want to use something like this, how something like this could serve you in the future. Next slide. General takeaways from this process is I think it's good to start your process of, if you're going to make a story map or a story map series like this, take inventory of the data that you already have and what you don't have and is missing, because data creation takes a lot of time. So be intentional about, like Karina was talking about earlier, like be intentional about the maps that you want to make, because it's going to take a lot of time to make them well. So assess where you're at with the data, but also determine your purpose. Like, what are you doing it for? What is the point of this story map? It's not just look at all this data on a map. I want to know why I'm looking at this data on the map. So keeping these things, it's an iterative process. Sometimes you start with one and then you realize you end up on the other. These things, this happens with a lot of data-based projects, not just story maps. So then number 3, make your maps look good. Make your maps interesting. Like, utilize the dynamic tools that are available. Like, people have attention spans are a limited resource these days. So sometimes just make it so that if people are just going to be scrolling through this and not really reading things close, that your maps tell the story as much as possible, is one thing I've realized. Like, I love to write a long thing, but I'm like, people may not even be looking at that. Like, let's make it something that draws people in. And number 4, of course, budget your time. All of this is going to take a lot longer than you think it's going to. So prioritize, be realistic, and have fun, I guess. Final takeaway. And that's it for me. And now I'm going to hand it off to our lovely partners at Esri, Andres and Lydia.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Allison. I know we're a little bit tight on time, but just good morning if you're on the West Coast like I am. Good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. I work closely with my colleague Lydia here at Esri. We're a team of two. We help nonprofit organizations wherever they are on their GIS journey. I am located outside of Los Angeles, and she's located outside of DC. Next slide, please. So we just wanted to first start off with a quick overview of the Esri nonprofit program. Right, so you're looking at a map of that community, right? There's over 17,000 organizations in this program, 100,000 users, and they're spread across 126 countries. This program was established by Esri in 2010 with the purpose to help organizations use GIS for good and maximize their positive impacts on people and the planet. So we'll talk a little bit more about the details kind of what it is. But if you scan the QR code, it'll take you to our page, and we'd love nothing more than to have you all join the program so that we can help support the great work that you do. Next slide. But of those 17,000 organizations, 2,000 of them work in preservation. So this is a dashboard created with Esri's GIS software, ArcGIS, showing where our users are located across the globe. So you'll see that there's thousands of users that are preserving their stories, their histories, and their communities with GIS. Right, so that includes completely volunteer-run organizations to large organizations like the National Trust. And so just showing you all of this to say that if you're using GIS already, you're not alone. And if you're considering it, there is a large community out there that can offer help and advice. Next slide. So how are they using GIS? These are just some examples. The top right may look familiar. That is an example from Latinos and Heritage Conservation that shows maps, surveys, and storytelling tools. The example underneath that is from the Smithsonian. It's a digital exhibit made up of story maps, right? Our storytelling application. The two examples in the middle are both from cities. So the top one is the city of Phoenix, and it shows cultural groups, right, and their movement throughout the city over time. The one underneath that is from DC, and it shows building age. So it tells you when buildings were built, who built them, and then how the footprint has changed over time as well. And then the two on the right, the top one is kind of the story of the birthplace of hip hop through a story map. And the example underneath that is the Montpelier Foundation's 3D view of James Madison's home. Next slide, and I'll turn it over to Lydia.
And we can really drill down all of these different topic areas, all of these different examples that we showed there into two main kind of pathways that at least we've noticed those historic preservation organizations that we work with kind of tend to work in primarily. Not to say they don't do a ton of other amazing work outside of it, but in the GIS world. So one of those being more around documenting and protecting specific landmarks, and the other around how we can collect and then also share these stories out. Next slide, please. And before we really jump into those two examples, I just wanted to highlight that Esri and ArcGIS does provide quite a lot of data in this realm as well. So as a part of our ArcGIS Living Atlas, which is this ready-to-use authoritative atlas of layers, we have quite a few historic places layers as well, both domestically in the US and internationally, as well as you can access a ton of other layers from different cities, different governments, things like that have been shared publicly, maybe through things like hub sites. I know I saw someone from DC in the chat earlier, and I'm personally a big user of the DC open data and hub site and some of that historical data there as well. The next slide, please. This is speaking just a little bit more to that first concept of preserving specific places. These places are inherently so spatial, we can put them on a map. We can link together historical documents like old newspapers in the top left example. We could render things like those old buildings in 3D and bring in series of images for how we are actually preserving the physical structure. Or we could do something maybe a little bit more simple, but more exploratory, where the user themselves can go through and explore how different points of the city might have changed over time. Next slide. And then on the side of the storytelling here, we have a couple examples, which I don't want to talk too much about this because I know we already heard quite a lot from LHC earlier, but some examples, we can use things like surveying tools to collect stories from people. This could be done in person, this could be done digitally. It's pretty quick to translate these now too. There's even AI tools that can help you, but obviously you can always do the translation yourself too and make sure that it's 100% accurate. And then sharing these out with things like those story maps, or ending maybe something like a story map with a call to action to really encourage people to submit their stories. Because at the end of the day, I think the stories are always what makes it so exciting to learn so much more about a specific place, to know who lived there or who might have, I don't know, walked by every single morning on their commute to work, or if you're going to the same library that someone used to go to, things like that. So next slide, and I think we're passing it back over to Andres as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So this just some information of the Esri nonprofit program. You can scan that QR code to learn more. But it's a deeply discounted program to get the technology in the hands of nonprofits around the world. Here in the US, eligibility is based on organizations' tax status and activities. So 501(c)(3) status is required. If you fit that criteria, you can get started for as little as $100 a year per user. You get access to the data and maps of the ArcGIS Living Atlas. You can access that large user community as well. We offer consulting services and support, and we've also identified nonprofit specialty business partners who can support your work as well. Next slide. I think this will be helpful for, I've seen a few questions in the Q&A chat of like, what resources are there to get started? Well, first, Esri does also have an education program, so you can get discounted access through there as well. And if you are some other entity that doesn't fit in education or nonprofit, but you're interested in getting access, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to get you connected to the right team here at Esri. I really wanted to call out, though, that we have the Esri Academy that provides you access to free self-paced training or paid instructor-led training. If you are an Esri nonprofit program member, you do get a 20% discount on any paid training. We also have the Learn ArcGIS site that provides you with free guided tutorials with real-world data, so you can get familiar with the tools and the workflows. Next slide. And if you have a project that you want to do, but you aren't sure how to get started, the GIS Corps has volunteers specifically for this reason. They're an organization that we partner with closely. All you need to do is go to their website and apply, and you can get some part-time help with your GIS work. And they currently do have a lot of volunteer time available. So definitely recommend you taking them up on that offer and requesting a volunteer from them. Next slide. And of course, we want you all to stay connected with us. So if you're already a user, thank you. And please stay updated with things that are new to come. If you're not, please join us at events, sign up for our e-brief, or reach out to us to just learn more. Throughout the year, we host meetups in different regions of the country. We're in the process of finalizing those for this year, and they'll be up on the site soon. At these meetups, you can meet other members of our team, connect with peers, see how they're using GIS. You'll directly hear from other nonprofits of how they're using it, and you even get hands-on help in getting started. And then in February, in just a couple of weeks, we'll be having our annual Fed GIS conference in DC. The attendance is free for our nonprofit program members, so we'd love to see you there. And if you want to learn more about our future meetups, sign up for that e-brief, the QR code in the corner. This will be sent on a quarterly basis to your email. You'll get the latest case studies, resources, any product updates that will help you stay inspired and just know what's going on, what's new in GIS to support nonprofits. And with that, I will go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all for the time today.
Great, thank you. Ron, if you want to drop the slides and pull everyone up, we'll just ask a couple of questions. We have about 5 minutes left, but I think we can go a little bit longer. So if everyone wants to pop your cameras on. If you guys couldn't tell from the chat and the questions, a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, a lot of appreciation for everything that you all have been sharing. I'm kind of summarizing some of the questions I saw pop up. So maybe the first one to start off is, how are you funding these and how do you make the case? Does anybody want to start? Sorry, this is very vague. What is your funding model for GIS and how do you make the case to people who don't really understand GIS's
I guess I can go first. So I will say that I am an absolute big fan of the nonprofit program that Esri has. Speaking directly to numbers, depending on the amount of users you have at your organization, is depending how much the price will be. So one user is $100. That is incredibly, incredibly affordable compared to other services out there. So we are big fans of that. It makes it extremely, extremely affordable for us, which allows us to budget for compensation for our participants and for travel to these sites and for all of that. So we mainly run off of grants, but also the Mellon Foundation, thankfully. So we are constantly seeking more donors and more sponsorships and more funders. So if anyone out there would like to fund, we would love to have a conversation with you. But I will say that we are incredibly big fans of the Esri nonprofit program. Again, it's incredibly affordable and it allows us to, as I said, compensate for other things that are necessary for this work.
I will add a bit to that from working in a city organization. The push to support our GIS infrastructure has been, an incredible uphill battle, mostly just because of the lack of understanding of what it actually is, regardless of the amazing things that we can do with it. So it is a difficult push no matter what. But what we found is to get more funding support and infrastructure support is to really just do projects at a staff level and just go for it with the amazing people that we've hired. Luckily, we've gotten this far with it. And because of the success of those, that's been able to make the impact to continue building more things like that. And also just educating our leadership on what it is. If your leadership doesn't understand or thinks that it kind of comes out of a box or it's Google Maps, like it's kind of toast. So just really taking the time to educate your leadership.
And I can comment on our Route 66 work specifically. We feel really fortunate because we had a private donor who was willing to support the larger Route 66 initiative at the National Trust, but then further the mapping and GIS work that we've been working on. And I think to some extent I think as Hannah said, the success of our initial phases led to additional funding. And so I think it's just taking the advice of everyone here and doing that initial phase, ensuring that you have impact in initial phases. So hopefully you are able to do additional fundraising as the project continues. And I don't remember if it's a question in the chat or if it was answered, but I think the ongoing is always a question for us and all of the data work that's being done of how do we maintain these tools and how do we maintain this data long term. Long term in technology may only be 1 to 5 years, it depends. And so even thinking about how do we make sure that these tools don't just expire really quickly is something that we're always thinking about and thinking about how can we stretch funding, how can we think about leveraging internal resources, interns, like there's a lot of different ways that we're thinking about being able to do that. But I just want to point out that it's something that's always on our minds as these tools are created.
I think this is for, I have a couple questions for Andres and Lydia that I feel might be helpful to the group. Someone was asking about how to contact you if they have questions. I don't know if there's a generic email that you want us to share that goes to you guys. If you send it to me, I can include that in the follow-up, but you can also drop it in the chat. We had a question about Native American or tribes and nonprofits and how does that fit within this program? And then someone asked a little bit more about the individual, because if you're not connected to a nonprofit, I know you mentioned some things people could do in your chat, but I think it might be worthwhile to touch on that as well. So it was like a 3-part question thing there.
Yeah, of course. So I think the first part, I will drop a general email alias in the chat. I think I dropped my direct work email, but I'll share our nonprofit one as well. It's just nonprofit_inquiry@esri.com. The second question of kind of nonprofit tribal organizations. If the organization is a 501c3, more than welcome to apply and join a nonprofit program. If not, Esri also does have we do have Native Nations offerings. And so if you're unsure where you maybe fit in, reach out to me, please, and we can have a conversation with that team and ourselves included, just to make sure that you are set up for success and you have what you need access to. Um, and I'm sorry, what was the third question?
It was about individuals,
Oh,
and like accessing the tools if it's not affordable for any, because we've talked a lot about nonprofits, but we have a lot of consultants and we have a lot of individual historic preservation professionals who'd like to learn. And so I think digging in a little bit more about how they can get that training.
got it. So Esri also offers a personal use license. Right, this can't be used for like commercial purposes, but if you're just interested in learning, you can also access that one. It's $100 a year as well. Right, and so that still gives you access to all the trainings and anything else as well. But yeah, that would be my recommendation. If there's something else specifically that people are looking for, have questions on, please reach out. I'd be happy to make sure that it gets you situated.
See if there's anything else in here. Um, I think Kate, you touched on this a little bit about data update and managing data sets. Does anybody else want to add to that? Because it is one of those things that you have to continually invest in. And so I think maybe talking about your plans behind that might be a good thing to touch on.
I can speak to that. When you're thinking of how your project can be used, sometimes it's very easy, especially with some providers. Esri makes it very easy to put things together, throw up your data sets, and keep going, which is excellent. But you really need to have long conversations with the professionals available to you on how you want to set everything up, automate as much as you can, and make sure that you understand and have some sort of organized record on where data sets are coming from and how you're going to go about it. So it's really the quality of planning well and making sure that you can hand that off, to somebody else to follow along, and not have things just kind of pass away if you move on to a different spot. So.
Anyone else? Okay, it's about 3:03. If you submitted a question that we are answering, I'm going to have an email address in a slide that we use to close out, so you can always send it there. But Ron, if you can pull up the slides real quick for our closing comments. To those of you asking, we will be sharing the recording, the slide deck, every link that was shared in the chat in the follow-up email following this session. It will go to the email address that you registered with. It will come from Zoom. But if for some reason you do not see it, I am actually building a stories page on our website for it. So you should be able to just search for it in about 24 hours. It will also be, the recording of the session will be on our YouTube channel as well. But before I lose you, we have two upcoming webinars in February. The first one's on February 10th about advocating successfully for state historic tax credits. We have a great panel of people talking about what they have done in various states to advocate for state historic tax credits. So we hope you'll come to that. And then federal preservation priorities for 2026 is on February 25th in advance of Preservation Advocacy Week. The link for where you can register for that will be dropped in the chat, but I'll also put it in the follow-up email. We hope to see you for one of those. And then finally, thank you so much for coming to this webinar. Special thank you to all of our speakers for their great information, great examples. I know everyone really appreciated. The email address forum@savingplaces.org is where you can send your questions if we didn't answer it. And as I said, all of this is recorded, all of this will be shared. And finally, we will have a survey when we close out this webinar pop up. Please take that survey. It will also be in the follow-up email. The last question gives you space to give us additional feedback to tell us how we did, but also give some suggestions for future webinars, not only for historic preservation at large, but also for GIS, because I can sense that there's a great need and a great enthusiasm for more GIS content. And that's what we're here for. So tell us what you need, tell us what you want, and we will see what we can make happen. And with that, thank you again to everyone for coming and for the great conversation in the chat. And have a good day. Stay warm if you are in the cold.